All right, everybody, welcome back to Apex Mind. Adam with you here as always. And on this episode, I am very happy to welcome to our show Liz Reveles. Liz, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam, so much for giving me this opportunity, and it's great to see you.
Yeah, we'll get into it more, but Liz and I used to work together many years ago, and she is an expert in leadership development, which is a topic that I know many of you want to hear about. But before we get into her current expertise, Liz, you've been in learning and development and people support even longer than I have. So, can you tell us like what drove you to originally go into that field of supporting and developing other people at work?
Yeah, I think I've always had that propensity. The very first job I ever had was in customer service. So I always wanted to help people. But, once I got into, like you said, I was in the game for a while with the industry that I was in. So, I just had a lot of opportunities to just maneuver through a lot of different positions. So the place where I landed that I really liked was learning and development, because actually I wanted to be a teacher. That was my original degree plan. So
Wow.
I said, bonus, I get to be a teacher in corporate America. But it brought so much more out, Adam. As you know, it's like you may start doing this, but then all of a sudden, training leadership classes really caught my attention.
Mhm.
But also being a leader within the organization really just pronounced a lot of other things. That were happening within the culture of the organization. So that my passion landed right there.
Yeah, so you both developed leaders at the business, but also you were a leader of other L&D professionals. So how did you balance those two needs of developing people in the target work groups that you supported and the trainers or developers that reported to you?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because I think that that's a lot of what's happening even now. But you really have got to see what are the strategies that are coming down, and how much do I need to push down to my front line? How much do I need to tell my employees about what's going on? What are the things that I need to pocket that I really need to strategize and work on? And one of the things I do with my clients specifically around this is you really have got to be a great time strategist. You really have got to learn how to create those pockets of times for yourself to do the work you need to do, but also be there for the people that need you the most. So I right now, there are some things that I say, gosh, I wish I would have known this when I was, leading, and been more dutiful to it. But I really have to tell you, having a great productivity plan
Mhm.
really helps you to get it all done. It really does.
Man, there's so many good nuggets that you shared there. But I want to touch on that productivity plan because, all of us, I think, have time challenges, but especially someone who's a leader that has direct reports. I mean, time is a very valuable resource. So, I mean, can you share a little bit about what productivity tips have worked well for you lately?
Sure, absolutely. Like I said, the class that I use with my clients, I always call it becoming a time strategist, because to me, it's like you look at your calendar and you're like playing chess with things. You say, well, I've got to move this over there, but then this comes in and I got to make sure I get this over there. But what I like is the fact that, I really make time to be disciplined to do what I need to do. But I also go according to what my rhythm and flow is. It's not, my day changes every day, so I don't
Mhm.
stick to a structure. I have foundational components that say I need to block out certain things. Don't overload yourself, but block out certain things that I know have to get done today, and understand that I've just got to give myself a little bit of grace if I don't get something done. And it's like, okay, well then let me move it to the next day. But using those time blocks and blocking out what's important. And as we all know, that we've been through many time management classes, but I think the key for me is that you've got to get rid of a lot of minutia before you really understand how to get your calendar to where it's really going to be a productivity tool for you.
Mhm.
So an example that I'll provide for you is a client I was working with had so many difficulties with people, being a time robber. She needed to have conversations about her workload, and there was a lot of these things that were swirling with her. So we talked about all of those things, what she could do to resolve them, how it was going to help her. And then we finally got into the actual, let's start working on your calendar. Now that you've cleared up those conversations, they're on the same page with you, you understand what you need to do. And I have found that that has really helped people stay more disciplined to their calendar, because it's unique and specific to them.
That's awesome. I like the concept of getting rid of things that maybe you can get rid of. Something in my personal life I've done lately is there's this concept called an unbucket list. of like
Yes.
things you never want to do again. Like, what can you get out of your life that you never want to do again for the rest of your life? And maybe that's a bit extreme, but if you look on the micro level, a lot of leaders do have their time robbed. Um, Follow up on that. Let's talk about leaders that maybe don't have time to come to development courses. A lot of leaders are so focused in their day to day that maybe
Yes.
training or developing themselves takes a lower priority. So, how do you address that?
Well, like with my clients, I think the great thing about having your own business, I mean, you can pick and choose sometimes. And I think that, I don't want to be very cavalier in saying that, but I say that because I really want my clients to get the maximum benefit out of what it is that I have to offer. So one of the first buy-ins that I have is that the top has got to buy into what it is that I want to do for their leaders, whether it's a CEO, a VP. It's like, here's what I'm going to do. How I'm going to help your directors, your managers, your supervisors. But here's what I need from you. If this is something that you can't do, where can we compromise? Because I want you to be involved because it's important. And, to me, I think setting that tone initially really helps to
Mhm.
push those programs through. And, it's interesting that you say that because that's what I spoke about on my talk last week on LinkedIn, was really focusing on those middle leaders. And it's always like, well, we can't be out of work for 2 days or for a day because the numbers are going to drop or things are going to happen, things like that. But we've got to change our culture, and we have to shift the paradigm. We've got to rethink what's happening in the world today post pandemic, and
Mhm.
what are the needs of people that are going on right now. And it really has to start from the top. And I'm happy to say that I've read a lot of articles with some really great companies that are doing some phenomenal things, that are actually taking the time to say, we have to be involved. We have to think about mental wellness for our employees. We've got to get them trained. We've got to fortify them, because if we don't, it ruins the frontline experience. And then here comes your attrition. So
Yeah.
it's just a whole gamut of things. It's a ripple effect of, when one thing doesn't get really put in place and there's not a lot of buy-in, then you'll get a ripple effect on the negative side. And then, but you also, if there's a great buy-in, you're going to get that positive ripple effect that's going to be great for the organization.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned the top down of, getting the senior leader buy-in, because a lot of leadership development programs I've seen over the years, and I've seen a lot. It seems like every year a larger company might roll out a new one. It seems as if the frontline leaders might get some sort of structure or plan or frameworks to follow, and it doesn't always get followed up on. It doesn't always have that support from the senior leaders. So, can you tell us a little bit more about, other than just getting the buy-in, like what have you done to ensure that that is a cultural thing and it's something that they're going to stick with more than just right past the training?
Well, initially, what I do is I really sit down and I assess. I normally, once they've decided they want to, have this training, or they need some help, I sit down and I assess. And, I see, what have you done? What kind of assessments have you done? Voice of employee surveys? Have you done focus groups? What are your employees saying about what's not happening with your leaders, or what's happening with your leaders? So we need to, figure all of that out. Once we do that, we talk with, whether it's the director, VP, whoever it is that within this organization that's going to sponsor the program. And we let them know, here's what they're saying, and here's the plan that I have. What would you care to add to it? What's important to you? What do you want to ensure that I talk about? So by doing that, it gives them to say, I respect where I'm at, and I want to ensure that my message is aligned with the message you want to see happen. And I think that ties into something we talked about earlier. So there really is no model. You really have got to listen to your clients, and you've got to tweak according to what's going on in their organization. What are the current trends that are happening in the workplace right now that they need to work on? So for people that are in learning and development, it's real important to say, we're going to give the leeway for this conversation to happen, because it needs to happen, but we can't script it out, because it's just going to happen organically. And I think that that's what's missing in a lot of pieces right now.
Yeah, we did talk about that earlier before we started recording, about how there's so many different vendors that sell packaged leadership
Mhm.
trainings to companies. And I sometimes get this cynical view. I'm like, it doesn't matter which model or package you follow. What matters is the consistency and the senior leader support. So I'm glad to hear you reinforce that with all your work. working with leaders. Now, you mentioned like you ask them for the gaps and what they're seeing. Are there common gaps or things that you're seeing across organizations that leaders tend to need extra development with?
Top two are time management and communications.
Wow.
And
Well,
then and I got right off the bat, I could say that because of the amount of clients that I've been working with, and that's like number one and number two. And then the third one is coaching and development, those coaching conversations, the structure behind coaching, how does that happen? So those are really the top three that I would say usually pop up the majority of the time.
yeah, that's fair. I know we talked about time management just a little bit ago. When it comes to communication skills, now that can encompass a wide variety of things, right? Anything within that, or is it just depends on the company and the positions of the leaders?
I think that I think it depends on the position of the leaders, but I think at the end of the day, people think that they're having conflict, but it's really a lack of communication. With some of the assessments that I do, that really helps me to identify the priorities in the workplace, which really makes a lot of sense. And it just bridges a gap so quickly with just that one class. But again, to your point, even though, this curriculum is packaged, I've made it my own, and I make it my own according to what my client tells me is happening. I may have the principal foundations of specific concepts that I want them to know, but it's real important for me to give them the reality of what's happening in their workplace, or really talk about how does this fit into your workplace? Tell me more about this to see how we can make it work for you. And once you really start digging into that, but you still have, this flow that you have with your curriculum, it's great. And it makes for a much better class. They remember so much because they can relate. They're like, yes, that always happens to us. So yeah, definitely with the communication class that I train, it really hits the nail on the head, and it really resolves a lot of issues that initially we discovered, and then we take it from there to see, okay, what's next on the plan now that we've taken care of this.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do want to talk about like virtual and the impacts to workplace, but before I do that, because you just said you want it to be relevant to them, and I know one thing I noticed that was a pillar of what was listed on your website was that you want the training to be relevant and sustainable, and I think those two things stood out to me because sometimes that training isn't relevant, right? It's just this generic out of the box thing.
Mhm.
You're saying you customize it. Can you share also about that sustainable piece? What do you do to make sure this is still going to be used 6 months or a year after they go through the course?
Yeah, and after where we used to work and what we were involved in, I think that was always the issue, is like, what is the follow-up? What is the latest and greatest technology that we can use to push out something so they remember what we're doing and all that great stuff? So for me, and this is a thing we've heard all the time, Adam. There is no follow-up. We go to the training and there's nothing. So part of my plan is that once we do the training, I have a 30, 60, 90 check-in. So I said, we're not done. I said, we're doing the training, but then you get to see me for 3 more months afterwards. And I also include some one-on-one coaching in my client packages for them, so that I can say, is there somebody that's having difficulty with the concept we learned? They just can't move through it. Well, I have X amount of hours included in my package, so we can do some one-on-one training to make sure that they feel good about it. And it'll give you information to know whether this job is a fit for them or not, and that comes up quite a bit as well. But yeah, definitely, I'm with you. I'm all about, I at least do a 90-day follow-up to say what's working, what hasn't worked, what needs to change. Do I need to do another mini workshop to reinforce some things? So, usually with one client, depending on what they need, I'm usually with them for about 6 months, 6 or 7 months.
That's good. Something that I talk about a lot on here is that generally one-time trainings are not going to be as much impact as if you have follow-ups, or if you have something that's like a resource that they can access afterwards. So I think that's great. And I also like that you provide those tailored sessions for the people that maybe are outliers. Maybe it's a new
Yeah.
leader. When you think about someone new into a leader role versus, I'm sure you also provide training and development for more tenured or senior leaders. How do you see the differences between the needs there, and how do you address both?
With the newer leaders, they're very excited. They're ready to learn. They're like, how should I do it? And they're afraid of failure. They're like, what if I don't do it right? It's like, it's okay. You're going to learn as you go. But getting these foundational components, at least you're sitting in the right seat. And the tenured leaders, you have to make sure, we're coming right back around to that relevancy, is that you've got to give them something that they're going, wow, I never thought about it that way before. And right now, post-pandemic, there's a lot of those nuggets out there right now based on just the entire dynamic. So, you know, with the more tenured leaders, I'm working a lot with them on, you know, what's happening in the workplace now with the hybrid situations, with, you know, how you need to be purposeful and how your coaching conversations go, what needs to be included in those conversations now that maybe we didn't have to have pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the newer leaders coming in, they're learning it as they go. But the newer leaders, if they especially the younger millennials, you know, they spent a couple of years not really being able to be in a workplace. So their experience was not as robust as those of us that started our careers when we didn't have to worry about that. So they're a little bit behind the curve on, you know, how do I interact? What do I say when I'm in the office? So helping them, especially if they're going to be in a leadership position, is just helping them to navigate and understand, you know, what it's like, what to expect. And you know what? And it's okay. And I think that's the biggest thing. If anything else, Adam, out of this whole thing is just there. It's okay to talk about, I'm afraid. I'm not sure if I can do that. Can you help me? Because we know back in the day that was perceived as a sign of weakness, you know, and it's like, the times have changed. It's not like that at all. So it's just really helping them to just be more comfortable, celebrating what they do know, because they're very, very knowledgeable in the tech world that they've grown up in, and celebrating that and appreciating that and encompassing that with a lot of critical thinking and other things that take a little bit more time, that they want instant gratification. So, you know, it's just helping to balance that out for them.
Yeah, I think a few things you said there were really good. I mean, I know I read an article somewhere on LinkedIn that talked about the impacts to remote work of younger versus more experienced workers, and that younger workers who didn't have as much of a network were a little bit more impacted by the fact that we were remote, and those kind of office networking opportunities. I know some companies tried them, but a lot of those virtual happy hours and different things weren't really the same as the old way. So I think that's good that you're addressing both of those. One more thing before we kind of switch a little bit here. I know you've worked with both, you know, large companies, local companies. You're in El Paso, Texas, so you work with companies in the community there, and as well as you support the folks in the military. And you told me earlier about a like a job fair of folks transitioning from military to civilian, and that could be challenging for people. So what did you notice from the needs of those transitioning military members into the civilian space?
Yeah, that was very interesting. It was part of me being a part of my local SHRM chapter, and leveraging that incredible resource. So we were invited to volunteer to help a lot of these soldiers that are transitioning out to civilian life, and to provide them some tips and tricks on, you know, basically resume writing, you know, have your elevator speech, let's do a mock interview. But what I noticed with the groups that I sat with, just because of how I am, I had to say, hey, before we get into any of that, you know, tell me about what is your passion and what are you thinking about that you want to do. I really felt that I really didn't want to talk to them about resumes and all of this other stuff without really understanding these people are going into a world that they haven't been in quite a while, and it's changed. And, you know, it's about knowing about how do you use LinkedIn and how do you network on LinkedIn, and what are some of the other things that will help you find jobs. So, you know, before all of that, I just wanted to check mentally where they were at. And a lot of them expressed the fear of, you know, just really understanding how to get a job and how to navigate in this new world of, you know, it's not about, you know, walking in and, you know, shaking hands, and, you know, a lot of it is virtual. A lot of it is, you know, we'll, you know, get on Indeed and they'll, you know, they'll flesh it out for you. So they're very, you know, they're afraid about that, but they're also afraid about losing that camaraderie that they've been so close to, that they've had in that military, that support. And how are they going to build that on the outside. So we really wanted to let them know there's many networking opportunities available, but we emphasized that the biggest thing was the fact that they're veterans. And so many companies right now are really doing a great job of embracing our veterans. They're helping to find a place for them in their organization and maximizing their skills to really help their organization. So by boosting their confidence to let them know that their expertise is needed, they really felt really good, and you could tell that they said, okay, this isn't so bad, but I still got to put in the hard work, but it's not as bad as I thought.
Yeah, that's great. I think you made a good point about a lot of companies are great about recruiting military members. And I've seen that at companies I've worked at. Just about any company I've been at does a good job bringing them in. But I think the things that you did were good about helping them to transition from that area that could be more rigid structure like the military. And like you said, the camaraderie of your people that you're serving with versus in a corporate world. Sometimes there's structure, but for the most part, there's a lot of autonomy, and there could be confusion amongst teams. And depending on where you work, you're not always going to be best friends with your teammates. Sometimes you just work together and you're working towards that common goal. So I think those services you did for them were great. A few more things on leaders that I wanted to touch on. One being, I think being a leader today is harder than it's ever been because the pace of change of business. And one thing that leaders have to do is they have to learn new technologies and trends and just deal with changes to the business. Complete redesigns of how we do work, whether it be project management or chat interactions or meetings or whatnot. So how have you worked with leaders to help them keep up with that pace of change that is in modern business?
Yeah, one of the things that I do is, and this is that generation gap thing, is that I really encourage them to really maximize on their younger peers, because they are very good at really picking up this technology, because that's what they've grown up with, and they can learn a thing or two with working this technology. But I also recommend a book by a gentleman by the name of Jacob Morgan, and he is all about the future of work, and he talks about what leaders are going to be needing within the next 10 years, and technology is right up there. It's like number one. And so for that relevancy, it's like, don't shy away from reading about all this new AI technology that's going to start to come in. How is it going to be involved in your workplace? How is it going to impact the work that you do? How is it going to impact your customers? Be smart and learn about that, because that'll just make you a better resource for your people. And and it just kind of brings everybody together when you can really speak that same language. So I always, especially with leaders that that shy away from technology, I really say, just dip your toe in. You already have a smartphone, so you're halfway there, so you're good. So now it's really working with your HR department to say, hey, what technologies are coming in here? What is it that I need to know as a leader? What tools are available for me to help me be more streamlined? And do some research yourself, get involved in listening to podcasts, reading certain articles. So that's part of that relevancy part. We can't stick our heads in the sand anymore. We really can't. It's like you said, it's coming fast and furious, and it's just, the technology is just changing and changing and changing.
Yeah, it seems like 20 years ago, you could just be good at something and stay
Mhm.
good at that thing for a couple of years. And today
Yeah,
you might have a
agreed.
couple of months these days.
Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely.
I,
But it's not that way now, especially with technology, because some people it's a gift. I will say it's a gift. So, and if you're not that proficient in technology, find somebody who is and learn from them, and or use them as a resource, your go-to person. It's okay. You don't have to be the master of everything.
yeah, yeah. And something I've always been a big advocate for, but especially like what we talk about on the show, is don't be afraid to leverage outside resources too. So your company may not have in-depth information to teach you about AI or data analytics or Slack or podcasting or whatever it is you have to learn. But you know what Google and YouTube do, and there's
Yeah.
an amazing amount of information out there that people can learn from.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you say that, because now so many people are self-teaching. They're learning about a lot of things, they're capitalizing on it, and they're doing a great job of just really helping themselves to stay relevant. You don't really have to, go to say, I've got to get this certification for that, or I have to go do this. It's like, to your point, Adam, let me go to YouTube and see what are the latest trends on this.
Yeah, and I've played around a little bit more recently with supplying resources, even within a company, and just curating an external list and pulling some intelligent sources from articles and videos and maybe some podcasts, and just giving them that list. And as a if you're a team that creates content, man, that saves you a ton of time and resources if your company is okay with you pulling those external resources.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And I think that that's the world we live in now. And it's not about, I'm going to just keep it to myself, and this is what I'm doing. It's like, no, 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 we got to be the gift that keeps on giving. And, here's a link below, follow this. It might lead to something else or some other articles embedded in there that may help you. And that's what I appreciate about what's going on with so many professionals now. We're really willing to just share. And if it reaches one person and changes something for them, good. We've done our job.
Yeah, and I like that you recommended that book from Jason Morgan. I haven't read that yet, so that's going on my list. You can see my bookcase in the back. I have more books that I need to read, but I'm a sucker and I buy more because I'm always
Yeah.
wanting to learn. But that's a good resource too. We don't have to just go the high tech new stuff. We can go with a book, or maybe there's a lecture or a certification you can recommend to people. That's the beauty, is we have the old ways of doing things, certificates and degrees and books and so on. And we have the new things of everything available on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, I have a few more questions for you that I like to ask every guest, but before I do that, I want to give you a chance, and I'll put everything in the show notes. But where can people reach you if they're interested in connecting with you, or learning more about what you do with leadership development?
Sure. You can go ahead and reach me via LinkedIn, Liz Reveles on LinkedIn. And then you can also go to my website, lizreveles.com. And I do have a contact page on there. And I do offer a free 30-minute consultation for anybody, just so we can kind of go through what's going on in your organization, or either with yourself, because I also do some one-on-one coaching as well. So those are the best places to reach me.
Awesome. Well, I will put the links to both of those in the show notes. Those are great. You can see I have both of my dogs in here with me, so I'm trying to keep them
I
occupied so they don't
know.
make too much noise. And I
You
heard
have
yours in
that,
the
and I have
background.
my dog, and I have my dogs barking outside of my door. I'm like, no, you can't come in.
It's the blessing and the curse of being able to work from home. Is I love being around
Absolutely.
them. Well, a couple questions that I like to ask every guest, and so I'll just ask you. And this could be either personal or professional, but what is something you learned lately that has benefited your life?
Wow. Wow. I think for me, I'm going to go on the professional level, is really how we really need to incorporate more conversations about mental health as a leader into our conversations. And it's okay to do that. I am following this organizational psychologist. His name is Adam Grant, and he's on the chief science board for Better Up. So I was reading an article about how him and Prince Harry have been talking about mental fitness, and how important mental fitness is, just as important as physical fitness. And, you've really got to make sure that you can have those conversations now. You can go back to your work career, and I can go back in my work career, and nobody would ever talk about that. They're just sorry that something's going on, but the work has got to go on and you got to do it.
Yeah.
So, for me, that has really, from a professional perspective, it's really helping me to have better conversations with leaders as to how they can incorporate that in their coaching sessions, and why it's so important, especially because of the new workforce that we have coming in. And I think for the older workforce, it's kind of like a relief. It's like, great, they're finally talking about something that I've been wanting to talk about forever. So I really appreciated that article, and I'll send it to you. I'll send you the link, Adam, so you can just put it on there as well, because I think it's where we're at right now. It's the world we live in, and being physically fit is important, but having that mental fitness and really understanding that we're all different and we all work at different levels and we all have things going on, and we can talk about it. It's okay. And I love that. I really do. It's much needed.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, send me that link and I'll make sure that's in the show notes. But you're right. I mean, I think it's something we didn't talk about before, and leaders probably bared the biggest brunt of that because they had to, be in the middle of the employee and the senior leadership.
Yeah.
But even today, I mean, the volatile last couple of years that we've lived through. And I mean, if the economy is going to continue to be where it is, that might continue to be a challenge. And I think people need to address those things and not just forget about them and get the work done. But last question is, what's if you had to pick one thing, what's the number one thing you do to help people perform at their best?
Mm. Wow, that's a very insightful question, Adam. Wow. I would say for them to perform their best, whatever they're doing, it has to be their passion. I think that that's so intrinsic and it's such a part of who we are that if we're just working and schlepping along with certain things, we just don't find any joy in anything. So, for me, it's always just really talking to people about and working with these people, say, what is really your passion? What is it that really drives you and makes you, when do you work your best when you're at work? What are the things that you really feel like, I love doing this? So I really like tapping into that because I know that they're going to be a happier employee. The leader will be a happier leader, because they're really coaching to something that's really meaningful to that employee. So that definitely is the one thing.
That's great. Yeah, I think focusing on motivation, intrinsic motivation, and your flow, that's awesome. But Liz, it was a pleasure having you on. It's been a while since we've caught up, so I'm glad that
I
we got to speak
know.
today. But Liz, I'll put all your links in the show notes so people can connect with you. But thanks for coming on the show, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
I appreciate you so much, Adam. Thank you so very much.
Absolutely.